listener production.
Hey, Tara Cassidy with you, and welcome to The Briefing. Have you ever tried choking during sex? Or maybe you've seen it in porn, movies even. Well, it turns out that cheeky kink you thought was spicing up your sex life, well, it's killing women, and it could kill you.
Someone might think, no, I'm a loving partner, and this is part of our healthy sexual lifestyle. But essentially, every single health person that we've spoken to has said that there is no safe way to strangle. So every time you're doing it, you're risking your partner's life.
That chat's coming up in the second half of this episode. First, though, let's get into the headlines with Chris Spiru. It's Monday, the 14th of July.
Hey Tara, and to you listening, happy Monday. We're starting in China, where three of Australia's key industries are back on the agenda as Anthony Albanese continues his week-long visit to the country. It's Albo's second trip to China as Prime Minister, and today is expected to be all about trade, especially after a US-shaped curveball rocked his first full day yesterday.
Yes, the PM was pressed yesterday on fresh demands from the Trump administration to lift defence spending and say what role it would play if the US and China went to war over Taiwan. Here's what he had to say from Shanghai.
Our aim of investing in our capability and as well investing in our relationships is about advancing peace and security in our region. We support the status quo when it comes to Taiwan. We don't support any unilateral action there.
Yeah, and those questions were the elephant in the room in the lead up to his trip, and especially after those demands came through from Washington, because as we know, China is Australia's top economic trading partner and the US is our top defense partner. So if they were to go to war over Taiwan, which is a country that China wants to effectively invade, that would put us in a really, really tricky spot. But on a lighter note, Tara, Albo did get a chance to spruik some new things, including our newest tourism campaign, which is aimed at attracting more Chinese holidaymakers to Australia.
Good day, 中国的朋友们，大家好.
It features a Mandarin-speaking cartoon kangaroo and a young Chinese megastar out the front of some of our most iconic landmarks, including the Opera House. And he was yesterday whipping out lines like, come and say g'day to us down under, and talking about, this market having massive benefits for Australia, which is, to his credit, quite true. Chinese tourists are our highest paying visitors. The latest data showing more than 850,000 people from China come a year and spend around $9.2 billion. And it's only climbing, between last year and this year, Tara, it's up 25%, which is huge.
Okay, well, yeah, and Albo will be leaving China on Friday, but before then, he does have a few meetings scheduled with business, investment and sport leaders. As to today, we know he's meeting with China's biggest steel makers, and that's because Australia is the world's largest iron ore producer. China, as well as being our best tourists, they are also our top customer for iron ore. So he will be making the case for closer cooperation, especially amid the ongoing tariffs drama with Trump.
New South Wales Police are defending the actions of officers involved in a fatal shooting of a machete-wielding man in the car park of a busy shopping centre over the weekend. Police were responding to a brawl between two groups of women at Westfield Mount Druitt in Sydney's West on Saturday, when one of the women's husbands arrived at the scene with a large machete around 50 centimetres in length.
The 29-year-old father of two was shot by police after he approached the group of women aged in their mid-20s and didn't drop the weapon when asked by officers. Now, police say the incident wasn't gang-related and that the group weren't known to each other, with Assistant Commissioner Gavin Wood saying he's reviewed the body cam footage and was content with the response.
The investigation will be subject to scrutiny, as it should be, but their actions were brave. I spoke to both police last night. They were upset, and the enormity of what happened had started to set in.
Now, police are still investigating what actually sparked the fight, but say the swift response from security and police kept the violence contained, at least to the car park. Now, the man who was killed's wife was arrested but then later released, and all 6 women involved in the incident will also form part of an ongoing police investigation.
There's been a disturbing finding in the investigation into the fatal Air India plane crash, which killed over 260 people last month. In an initial report, investigators say the Boeing 787 Dreamliner's fuel switches were moved so that the engines were starved of fuel, leading to a total power loss on the plane. According to the report, it's a switch that's only initiated after landing, but on this occasion, cockpit voice recordings also showed one of the pilot asked the other why he did the cutoff, which the pilot denies.
Yeah, and during takeoff, the captain of the plane was actually monitoring his co-pilot who was flying the aircraft, and one of them has engaged that switch, and just before the crash, the switches were returned to their normal position. When the plane crashed, one of the engines hadn't actually managed to regain power. Now, for those wondering whether engaging this switch was an accident, intended, or someone mistakenly initiating that switch, well, that's obviously the question on everyone's lips. According to experts, the way those switches are designed is that they actually have a lever to prevent them from being accidentally activated.
Yeah, and one Canadian air crash investigator has told the BBC it would be almost impossible for that to happen, while a former director of NTSB, the state's National Transport Safety Bureau, says this finding is a disturbing one.
Yeah, and interestingly, the NTSB has actually previously recommended that cockpits install video recorders so that they can have an over-the-shoulder view of any pilot's actions. In this instance, it would be able to determine whose hand was actually on that cutoff switch between the pilot and co-pilot. Now, this report, it's also found that the plane had major system failure, and there's early signs that both engines had failed. So, look, we're learning more every day about what actually took place, but there's still a lot more for investigators to get through. Apparently, the next focus for them is getting the pilot's full conversation from pre-takeoff to crash, transcribed word for word, so all of the communications can be reviewed to shed more light on what caused it.
Back home now, alleged corruption, violence and bullying by the CFMEU could be laid bare as early as next month, following an announcement from the Queensland Premier yesterday.
Today I can announce a commission of inquiry into the stranglehold and standover tactics of the CFMEU in Queensland and the protection racket that has allowed it to occur.
David Crisafulli announced the inquiry after interviews were conducted with over 60 people linked to the Construction, Forestry and Maritime Employees Union. The interviews formed part of a report detailing widespread systemic issues within the union, along with allegations it was using violence in its pursuit of political, industrial and financial power.
The way that women and children have been treated, workers, a drive to push down productivity in this state, people locked in rooms and intimidated to give an answer that a militant union wanted.
Now, David Crisafulli says that the government is going to use the most powerful tool that it has to put an end to these tactics, and it's labelled the inquiry Queensland's version of a union royal commission, with the inquiry able to compel witnesses to give evidence and actually recommend criminal charges. The Premier says anyone who enabled the CFMEU and its issues to fester over the last decade will also be brought into the spotlight. And this news about the inquiry, it has been welcomed by the former Premier, now the opposition leader Stephen Miles, who says Labor's offering its bipartisan support, having first put the CFMEU into administration. And he says he referred the allegations to the Queensland Crime and Corruption Commission last week, with a date for the inquiry yet to be set. Now, we've got a bunch of deep dives looking into the union, particularly in other states. So if you've got an interest in this area at all, we will chuck a link to them in the show notes.
And a spoiler alert for any tennis or Wimbledon fans, switch off if you don't want to hear the winner of this year's Grand Slam.
That's it. Yannick Sinner takes his piece of Wimbledon history. What a wonderful match.
That's right, Yannick Sinner can add Wimbledon champion to his resume, becoming the first Italian to win the tournament after coming back from a set down and beating Spaniard Carlos Alcaraz in 4 sets. Sinner saying it's a dream come true.
When I was young, this was only a dream of the dream, because it was so far away where I'm from. So I'm just living my dream.
Yeah, and this Wimbledon win is the 4th Grand Slam of Sinner's career and Alcaraz's first loss in a Grand Slam final, which would be devastating for him, but fantastic news for Sinner. Now, Chris, I don't know about you. I know this is very big news. It's exciting for tennis lovers, but I personally am not a huge tennis lover or spectator, but I love being a tennis spectator.
Okay.
Stay with me here. My favourite part is seeing all the articles, videos and photos that come from the people that attend, because it happens every year. And this year there were hilarious photos of Hugh Grant. He's watching on and they've captured him nodding off. My feelings exactly about tennis, Hugh, that he fell asleep during a Novak Djokovic Wimbledon match while he was seated behind Queen Camilla. The clip went viral. I mean, imagine paying that much to be seated in the Royals box next to the Queen herself watching Novak and falling asleep.
Yeah, and I actually have a family friend who's booked tickets who was there for the final. And let me tell you, those tickets are somewhere between $20,000 to $30,000 Australian, and those aren't in the box. So pour the money of this man. But look, the rest of the royals were also at Wimbledon. We had Princess Kate, King Charles, some other celebs like Henry Cavill, you know, the guy that played Superman, Keira Knightley, even our fave Aussies, you know, including Nicole Kidman and Chris Hemsworth.
Oh, maybe I have to go and get into tennis.
Yeah, you do. But look, don't get your hopes up for an Aussie victory anytime soon. The last time we had someone win the men's singles was Leighton Hewitt back in 2002. And the only person that's come close is Nick Kyrgios when he made it to the final with Djokovic in 2022. But of course, we've had Ash Barty in 2021. So, you know, there are some Aussie hooks here.
Come on, Aussies. Look, that brings our headlines to a close for today. Coming up next is my deep dive, looking into choking in porn and why there's been a push for it to be banned here in Australia. Have a listen to that up next. Erotic asphyxiation, breath play, choking, rough sex. Whatever you want to call it, it's something that over half of young Aussies have tried, according to various studies, largely because it's been normalised in porn and movies. But what if I told you that kink, it has a dark side, a fatal one that's led the UK government to announce it's now banning the depiction of strangulation in porn in a bid to better protect women. Lucy Lord is the CEO of a domestic violence prevention charity and is one of the people now calling on the Australian government to follow the UK's suit. Lucy, thank you so much for joining me on the briefing today. Why should strangulation or choking in porn be banned?
Morning, Tara. Thanks so much for having the Red Rose Foundation on your programme. Essentially, there is no safe way to strangle. Strangulation often occurs in a sense of power and control in a relationship, but that is not to say that it is always the fundamental reason why strangulation is occurring in a relationship. But bottom line is that there is essentially no safe way to do it.
And is the concern that it's being used as an excuse in domestic and family violence situations, or simply that it has physical harm for the people that endure it, whether it be during sex or any other reason?
That's a really good point, Tara. That's where the complexity lies. Essentially, it could be part of a power and control element within a relationship. So someone could be putting their hands around someone's neck to let them know who's in control. And in 27% of homicides plus, those that we know about where there was intimate partner violence in the history, there was known incidences of strangulation. What we feel is there were far more incidences of strangulation because people don't tell others about what they do behind closed doors in their bedroom. And there are many more deaths because the strangulation may lead to harm further down the line. So in terms of, it could be an intimate partner violence in domestic violence kind of settings. But as you also touched upon there, Tara, you can do it once and it'll be fine. You won't know that you've done any harm. But behind closed doors in a bedroom, you may do it tens of times, hundreds of times over a partnership, sexual relationship. And the harm that you're doing every single time may be slightly affecting arteries or carotid in the neck. It may be snapping bones, making them weak. What we've found as well is that it creates blood clots. We've had a person recently come to us who had a blood clot, feeling really dizzy, nauseous, vomiting, didn't know what to do. We got her to the hospital. They found out it was a blood clot. Thankfully, it was moving away from her brain. And that was in the last couple of weeks. So what was really, really shocking to us was the prevalence of this amongst young people. It's become normalised behind closed doors when they're trying sex for the first time, their first relationships. They're turning to porn to find out what to do. They're seeing this and then they're thinking, that looks like something we should try. Heather Douglas did some research back in 2023 that found that 57% reported that they had had strangulation as part of a sexual relationship, which astounded me and led me in my first 2 weeks at the organisation to have conversations with my teenage kids.
And that's very interesting. So in terms of the physical impacts it can have, I've seen online some of the commentary where people who obviously are partaking in it in sex are saying, oh, if you do it this way or you don't block the airways, it doesn't have any impact. But what you guys have found is actually that's not true at all. There's all different kinds of other repercussions that can come from it, leading to, it could just be the restriction of, like you said, blood vessels that could cause a clot and have other long-term effects. So what they're saying is not actually accurate. Now, the UK is committed to banning this, and you guys are calling for Australia to follow suit. Do you think that'll actually happen?
I certainly hope so, because the governments do appear to be committed to tackling violence against women and girls and preventing it. And one of these key indicators of some really dangerous perpetrators of intimate partner violence is that they will try strangulation. So if we remove the consent aspect of it, then you can never be in the position of having to consider whether a woman who is now dead consented to that strangulation or not. So essentially, if you're in a court of law and the woman died as a result of the strangulation, there is a question around consent. And the only two people that truly know whether consent was given are the person who strangled and the person who is now dead. And that person who strangled is going to have two choices put in front of them with their lawyer. Did they consent or did they not? And this is going to affect your jail time.
So it's being used as a defence trying to use it as a defence in those domestic violence cases. So there's really kind of two situations here. There's the repercussions on the domestic and family violence side, and then there's the just general physical impacts that it can have.
Exactly, Tara. And that's where the complexity lies, because it doesn't just sit in an intimate partner violence space. So someone might think, no, I'm a loving partner and this is part of our healthy sexual lifestyle. But essentially, every single health person that we've spoken to has said that there is no safe way to strangle. So every time you're risking your partner's life. And would you do the same in any other way that you might risk their life in the bedroom? Would you, for example, blindfold them to cross the road? That sort of thing.
And has this received any support from Australian politicians yet, do you know?
Not at this moment, no. The Queensland Law Reform Commission did do a review into the strangulation law earlier this year, where submissions were put in June, and they will be going to the Attorney General later this year. So there will be a report coming out, and perhaps, because we have taken a position on consent, perhaps it may be reviewed in terms of consent in law. But I'd imagine that there may be some more discussions around that before that happens. That's a big move.
And Lucy, I understand the foundation has been pushing for this for quite some time. What actually needs to change for this to go from conversations to law?
Yes, the Red Rose Foundation has been campaigning in this space since 1980s, and then in 2016 when the strangulation law came in. It is public opinion that needs to change. And as I said earlier, it is really the complexity around strangulation in your bedroom. Is it because someone is violently trying to control you in a domestic and family violence setting? Or are they just trying to have fun? But essentially, the bottom line is that fun is dangerous because you are risking your partner's life. So we really do need public opinion to change on that, particularly, as I said, around young people who are picking it up from porn, which is really easy to access these days. And therefore, it's becoming normalised, this violence against women aspect. So we need public to stand up and say, no, this isn't acceptable. We don't want our children putting each other at harm when they explore those spaces young in life.
And Lucy, just to wrap up, I guess what would be your message to young Aussies which have been quite disproportionately showing in the statistics that they do partake in this kind of behaviour during sex.
My message to young Australians would be there is no safe way to strangle. It really is the bottom line. That's what the health professionals tell us. It's a dangerous act. Please don't do it.
Lucy, thanks very much for joining me on The Briefing today.
Thank you, Tara.
That was the Red Rose Foundation CEO, Lucy Lord, speaking with me there about strangulation in porn. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. If you found this ep interesting, don't forget to leave us a comment or a review, or you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.
Listener.